since when did anger become a privilege reserved exclusively for men? Throughout history, when a man slams his hand on the table, raises his voice against injustice, or passionately protests wrongdoing, society tends to view his actions with admiration. His anger is celebrated as righteous, an emblem of his self-respect, his strength, and his leadership potential. People often describe such displays of male anger as evidence of character, moral clarity, and conviction. It is seen as natural, even necessary, for men to assert themselves forcefully when they feel wronged. Yet, when a woman expresses the same anger when she dares to raise her voice, to protest loudly, to stand up against injustice with visible outrage, she's immediately subjected to a starkly different set of judgments. Society does not call her courageous. Instead, it labels her emotional, hysterical, or rebellious, dismissing her anger as irrational or dangerous. The same fiery spirit that earns men respect is used against women to diminish and discredit them. This glaring double standard reveals a deeply entrenched societal bias in the way we perceive and respond to anger. Male anger is elevated and glorified. Female anger is vilified and suppressed. When a man becomes furious, it is interpreted as a rightful assertion of his dignity. When a woman becomes furious, it is perceived as a threat to social order, a spectacle to be controlled, shamed, or silenced. Yet anger at its core is a natural and legitimate human response to injustice, pain, and oppression. It is not inherently masculine or feminine. It is universal. Transforming women's anger into something shameful, something forbidden, is not merely an act of sexism. It is an act of control. By branding women's anger as irrational, dangerous, or disruptive, society pressures women to internalize shame, to silence themselves, to minimize their pain, and to conform to roles that maintain the existing balance of power. It is a mechanism designed not only to undermine women individually, but to preserve structures of inequality collectively, and it must be challenged. 2. A history of forced silence. For centuries, women were conditioned to believe that their value lay not in their voices, their ambitions, or their power, but in their ability to endure violence without protest, endure injustice without resistance, endure insults without confrontation, endure inequality with a bowed head and a silent heart. Generation after generation, women were taught that to be good was to be patient, to be accommodating, to be endlessly forgiving. A good woman was expected to keep her emotions in check, to suppress her anger, to swallow her rage for the sake of maintaining peace, even when that peace came at the cost of her dignity. Throughout history, whenever women dared to break this imposed silence, whenever they expressed anger, demanded rights, or refused to accept their oppression, society responded not with understanding, but with condemnation. In the 19th century, as women bravely fought for the right to vote, they were viciously labeled as hysterical, irrational, and unwomanly, as if political engagement somehow made them less feminine or less human. In the 20th century, when women demanded autonomy over their own bodies, seeking access to birth control and the right to choose, they were slandered as immoral, corrupt, and threats to the very fabric of society. In the workplace, when women spoke up for equal pay, for leadership positions, for respect, they were belittled and dismissed as overly ambitious, difficult, or simply out of place, as if their aspirations themselves were an act of rebellion against the natural order. Time and again, righteous female anger that rose not from vanity but from profound injustice, was twisted into a narrative of deviance. Women's outrage was not seen for what it was, a cry for dignity, fairness, and humanity. Instead, it was framed as a dangerous insubordination that had to be crushed to maintain control. And yet, if history has taught us anything, it is this: nothing of true value, nothing truly transformative has ever been achieved without anger. No right has ever been freely given in the calm of silence. Every hard-won freedom women now possess, the right to vote, to own property, to access education, to work, to choose their futures was earned through the fiery courage of women who dared to be angry, women who refused to sit quietly, women who refused to wait patiently for permission, women who understood that their anger was not a weakness, but a weapon, one that could shatter the chains society placed upon them. 3. A deeper analysis. Why is society so afraid of women's anger? Because anger is the true beginning of all meaningful change. A woman who remains silent, who suppresses her resentment, who convinces herself to endure a little longer, remains trapped within the walls that society has built around her. Silence keeps her chained to an existence defined by others. Silence perpetuates oppression. It tells the world that injustice is tolerable, that pain is manageable, that dignity can be postponed indefinitely. But a woman who allows herself to feel anger, real, burning, righteous anger, is a woman on the verge of transformation. Her anger is the first spark of rebellion, the first crack in the wall, the first breath of a new kind of freedom. It is through her anger that she begins to recognize the profound wrongs that have been committed against her. Her anger sharpens her vision. It awakens her to realities she had long been told to ignore. It gives her the language to name her suffering, and more importantly, the courage to no longer accept it. Her anger awakens her awareness of the injustice she has endured, often for years, even generations. Fuels her desire for resistance, breathing life into a determination to no longer be complicit in her own diminishment. Connects her with other women who bear the same invisible scars, building bonds of solidarity, understanding, and collective strength. Plants the seeds of movements, ignites revolutions, and drives the systemic shifts that redefine what is possible for future generations. Society does not fear women who suffer quietly. It fears women who rise, women who roar. It fears their anger because it threatens to dismantle the structures that depend on women's silence, submission, and invisibility. It fears their anger because anger is contagious. It moves from one heart to another, setting whole communities ablaze with a demand for change. When one woman dares to express her rage, she gives permission to countless others to do the same, and that collective awakening is what oppressive systems find truly dangerous. Women's anger is not chaos. It is not destruction for destruction's sake. It is not hysteria, nor is it mindless rebellion. Women's anger is awakening. It is the truth emerging after centuries of lies. It is the body and soul remembering that oppression is not natural, that suffering should never be normalized, that dignity is not negotiable. When a woman stands in her anger and refuses to back down, she's making a declaration to the world, bold, undeniable, and sacred. I will no longer accept the unacceptable. I will no longer make myself small to survive. I will no longer apologize for existing fully, fiercely, and freely. And through that declaration, change begins, not just for herself, but for every woman who sees her, hears her, and finds the courage to rise alongside her. 4. Historic images of angry women who changed the world. History is not merely a collection of dates and events. It is the story of courageous individuals who refuse to accept injustice. And time and again, it is women's anger, sharp, fearless, unyielding, that has carved new paths where none existed before. The world as we know it has been shaped by women who refused to stay silent, women whose fury against oppression shattered walls that seemed impenetrable. Consider Sojourner Truth, a formerly enslaved Black woman who, in 1851, stood up before a skeptical audience at a women's rights convention in Akron, Ohio. She looked directly into the faces of those who questioned her humanity and demanded, "Ain't I a woman?" Her words, burning with righteous anger, echoed far beyond that hall. She confronted not only sexism but racism at a time when society refused to see her as fully human. Her indignation was not polite. It was not tempered for the comfort of her listeners. It was raw, it was necessary, and it forced a reckoning that could no longer be ignored. Think of Emmeline Pankhurst, the indomitable leader of Britain's suffragette movement. For years, she was ridiculed, beaten, imprisoned, and slandered simply for demanding that women be allowed to vote. She did not ask politely. She did not sit quietly on the sidelines. Her rebellion, as her critics called it, was fueled by a deep, burning anger at a system that denied half its citizens a voice. Through hunger strikes, marches, and relentless activism, she forced the nation to confront its hypocrisy. Without her, and without the fire that sustained her, the concept of democracy would have remained shamefully incomplete. Or Rosa Parks, whose simple act of defiance in 1955, refusing to give up her seat on a segregated bus in Montgomery, Alabama, was far more than a moment of tiredness. It was a deliberate, angry refusal to be treated as less than human. Parks' courage, grounded in quiet but fierce indignation, ignited the Montgomery bus boycott, one of the most pivotal sparks of the American civil rights movement. Her anger was not chaotic or violent. It was disciplined, strategic, and transformative. Without her refusal to be demeaned, the struggle for civil rights would have taken far longer to gain the momentum it needed. And think, too, of Malala Yousafzai, the Pakistani girl who dared to demand an education under the brutal rule of the Taliban. Shot in the head simply for speaking up, she refused to be silenced. Her rage at the injustice of girls being denied basic rights did not harden her into bitterness. Instead, it propelled her onto the global stage. Today, as a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, she stands as a living symbol of the idea that anger, when directed with clarity and compassion, can reshape not just one community, but the entire world's conscience. If these women had suppressed their anger, if they had chosen to stay silent, to remain proper, to avoid making anyone uncomfortable, then our world today would be unimaginably darker, narrower, and far more unjust. Rights that we now take for granted would still be distant dreams. Voices that now inspire millions would have remained whispers lost to history. Movements that have redefined the meaning of freedom would never have been born. It was their anger that opened the door to justice. It was their refusal to accept indignity that forced the world to change. And so, when society tells women to calm down, to be nice, to not cause a scene, we must remember, every great leap forward began because someone, often a woman, dared to stand her ground, dared to be angry, and dared to demand more. 5. Women today. Anger is self-love. In the 21st century, women have undeniably made extraordinary strides. They occupy positions of power, influence public discourse, lead movements, and break barriers once deemed insurmountable. Legally, women enjoy more rights and freedoms than any previous generation. And yet, beneath the surface of progress, one stubborn stigma remains deeply entrenched: the condemnation of female anger. Even today, when a woman demands equal pay for equal work, she is often labeled as difficult, as though asking for fairness is somehow disruptive. When she asserts her need for respect and reciprocity in her personal relationships, she is called demanding, as if the expectation of basic human dignity is unreasonable. When she stands up to harassment, discrimination, or abuse, she is accused of overreacting or making a fuss, her pain trivialized for the sake of preserving social comfort. The message society sends is clear: women's anger remains uncomfortable, inconvenient, and threatening. And yet, anger, particularly the anger of a woman, is not a flaw to be corrected. It is not a loss of grace or a sign of instability. In truth, anger is a profound and powerful form of self-love. When a woman grows angry, she is not losing control. She is reclaiming it. She is refusing to normalize mistreatment, to accept cruelty masked as tradition, to excuse injustice simply because it has always been there. Her anger is the sharp, urgent recognition that she, like every other human being, is worthy of dignity, fairness, and respect. Far from a weakness, her anger is a form of radical affirmation. It says, "I know my worth, and I will not allow you to diminish it. It says, I refuse to stay silent in the face of harm. It says, I am not here to make you comfortable at the cost of my own soul. In a world that often demands women be agreeable, accommodating, and endlessly patient, choosing to be angry is a bold act of courage. It is an open declaration that a woman will no longer betray herself for the sake of social approval. She will no longer accept the unacceptable. She will no longer swallow her pain to make others feel at ease. Her anger is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. It is a necessary, life-affirming declaration. I deserve better, and I will no longer settle for less. 6. Shifting perspectives. Respect women's anger. It's time, long past time, to radically transform how society perceives and responds to women's anger. When a woman raises her voice, when she draws a boundary, when she demands better, do not rush to label her as crazy, unstable, or overly emotional, as if her valid feelings are a malfunction rather than a message. Do not patronizingly tell her to calm down, as if her emotions exist only to make others uncomfortable, as if her anger must be neatly packaged and quieted for the sake of societal convenience. Do not diminish her voice, mock her, dismiss her as irrational, or reduce her complex and powerful emotions to mere mood swings. Instead, stop. Listen. Truly listen, not to rebut, not to invalidate, but to understand the truth behind her words. Recognize that her anger is not baseless noise. It is the language of years, generations of enduring injustice, of being overlooked, underestimated, disrespected, and silenced. See her anger for what it truly is, a courageous unveiling of pain long ignored, a refusal to quietly endure what should never have been tolerated in the first place. Her fury is not a sign of personal failing. It is evidence of her deep, enduring strength, her unwillingness to abandon herself in a world that so often demands it. And most importantly, stand beside her. Support her. Amplify her voice rather than muting it. Join her in her fight for fairness, dignity, and a more just world. Because a society that listens to the anger of its women and honors it is a society that moves closer to true equality. Because when women are allowed to fully express their truth, when their rage is heard instead of feared, when their boundaries are respected in. 7. Final message. Don't fear your anger, harness it. If you are a woman reading this, hear me and hear me with the full force of truth. You have the right to be angry. You have the right to raise your voice. You have the right to demand to be seen, heard, and respected. Your anger does not make you less lovable. It does not diminish your femininity. It does not steal your grace or your worth. In truth, it does the opposite. It makes you more real, more raw, more powerful than any false mask society has tried to place upon you. It connects you to every woman who has ever been told to sit down, to be quiet, to smile, and endure. It aligns you with centuries of resilience, courage, and transformation. Turn your anger into something bigger than yourself. Turn it into a voice for the voiceless, for those who are too beaten down to shout yet still burn inside. Turn it into a movement not just toward personal fairness, but toward collective justice. Turn it into a living declaration that you will no longer shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never built to hold your true greatness. Anger is not a flaw to be fixed. It is a fire. Is sacred. Do not let anyone, not the world, not tradition, not even your own fears, extinguish that fire inside you. Do not let them convince you that your anger is something shameful. It is not a problem to be solved. It is a force to be unleashed. Let it light the path you were always meant to walk. Let it guide your hands as you rebuild what must be rebuilt. Let it push you forward when the world tells you to stay in place. Because here's the truth that too many try to hide. When women get angry, it is not the beginning of chaos. It is the beginning of change. When women get angry, don't call it rebellion, call it Revolution. Call it healing. Call it the birth of a new world, where women no longer have to apologize for simply being human, fierce, fearless, and free. You are not too much. You are exactly enough, and your anger is exactly what this world has been waiting for. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.